This is part 2 of my conversation with JJ Zachariason. Go check him out at lateround.com and get his prospect guide. Also, the show is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Code Mayo at Underdog Fantasy will get you a first-time deposit match of up to $100. And that's something that JJ and I talk about throughout the course of the show, how the transition from season-long to best ball is much easier than you think. You can go do that at Underdog. And we talk about why, obviously, and dig into that a little bit. We talk about the best quarterback prospects of all time coming into the draft, at least in our lifetimes, and where Caleb Williams may rank amongst all of them. And then the challenge, season 40. The cast has been released, and GG and I are excited as two big challenge fans. So hit the time codes. You can jump to whatever spot that you want and check out part 1 if you missed that one, where it's all NFL all the time, reacting to the draft and all of the latest moves. Let's go.
Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Experience.
At least the perception, because that's all you can really go on with this stuff until you see it actually happen on the field. But in terms of Williams as a quarterback prospect, like in our lifetime, let's say, who do you think was the number 1 rated quarterback prospect? Because I heard people talking about this with the NBA. Like remember when LeBron was coming out? It's like, oh, this might be the best player ever. And it turned out he was one of the best players ever. Wembanyama kind of had the same like buzz around him. Like the only other guys I can really think of that were like near their level was like when Anthony Davis came out of Kentucky. So for me, like when I'm really racking my brain trying to bring it back to like quarterback number 1, surefire, this guy's going to be awesome, it always comes back to Andrew Luck for me, that he was like the best prospect that I felt like people talked about pre-draft. Am I missing someone?
I think Trevor Lawrence was close. Like he wasn't quite Andrew Luck, but he was at least up there. And then, yeah, I mean, like I'm trying to think back to some of the other draft. Like, it's not like I'm even going back to like Alex Smith. It's not like Alex Smith was looked at this way.
No, because that was the year that like Rodgers could have gone 1.
Right.
And then it was Alex Smith, and just no one took Rodgers.
Yeah. Recent memory. I mean, recent history. Obviously, we're not going to go back into like the 80s or whatever, with like a Marino or something like that. But like recent history, I'd probably say, he's up there at least. There's always like the red flags for him, for many, seem to be more like question marks of off the field, of how into this he is and stuff.
But then he painted his fingernails and he cried with his mom, so therefore he can't be a good NFL quarterback.
Exactly.
Like I have these like from my group chat, Bear friends. Like this is why they hate him already. It's like it seems like a really bizarre reason to not like someone.
It's a very bizarre reason to not like. Like, just let the dude be him. And clearly, it doesn't seem like his teammates have any problem. I mean, he's throwing at Brendan Rice and Marshawn Lloyd's pro day today, or yesterday it was. So like, I think it's today actually. But regardless, I do think that Andrew Luck was probably a more flawless prospect, but this is the fact that we're talking about this tells you that Caleb Williams is probably gonna be pretty good.
Yeah, like just trying to get a sense. And it's funny because Drake May and even Jaden Daniels. Like, I always kind of look at that. I mean, what now becomes the Lamar Josh Allen class, but Baker goes number 1. Like Baker never really felt like that good of a number 1 overall prospect.
Oh no, he was. There was a question mark of Baker. Like people hated the Baker pick whenever he went number 1. Yeah.
And then like who else has gone number 1 in recent years? Like Goff was just like, yeah, sure, Goff, why not?
Yeah, now I'm gonna Google it.
I always find it funny that we haven't had this like stud. Burrow by the end of it felt pretty good.
Yeah, that's true. Burrow was but Burrow still wasn't. Maybe like maybe Cam looked at, and I don't think Cam was looked at this way either, because there were just question marks of like how his game would translate right to the NFL.
Yeah, and then even with Jameis, like Jameis was a really good prospect, but so was Mariota that year. That there wasn't really. It could have been Mariota at 1 instead of Jameis. Now, by the end, it was obviously going to be Jameis. But
yeah, Stafford.
Stafford. Stafford's a good one.
Stafford's a pretty good. Stafford. Maybe he's on the same level as like a Stafford, and then Luck is 1 above.
Do you worry about his size at all?
No.
At all?
No.
Okay.
Because he's not like Kyler Murray small.
No. But like when you're thinking like if we put him in the same category as like Stafford and even like someone like Luck, I guess he'd be more like Lawrence in that sense. Just like I think of Stafford, I think of like big. It's funny because remember the injury tag thing on
Oh
Stafford
yeah,
for years.
yeah. And
Like,
he's like the crazy. Now he just plays through anything, and yeah,
yeah, he ended up with like one of the longest start streaks in history, but his first 2 years he was just
happens all the
perpetually
time.
injured.
Adrian Peterson was injury prone entering the league, and then he had his moments because every running back has their moments, but then he plays for like 15 years.
Well, I mean, he did blow out his
Frank Gore too. Frank
was it
Gore's
his
another one.
Was he the Achilles or the ACL when
He had ACL. He had ACLs like multiple times.
Yeah, interesting stuff. All right, yeah, I just wanted to talk through that because I just find it funny that there hasn't been this like, oh my god, here is the next. I guess you'd say Joe Montana or Tom Brady, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Andrew Luck is really the only one I can remember being talked about that way.
Yeah, I think that Luck though was still probably on a different level.
Yeah, it seems to be that way even with the buzz. How old is Andrew Luck now? Like 32?
Yeah, he's not. Yeah, I mean, he could. Well, he couldn't come and play. By the way, I saw a clip of Luke Kuechly talking, and that dude just went because he went the Andrew Luck path. Like he retired early, and he was like in his prime, whatever. And he now is built like Andrew Luck. They're just both skinny dudes. Like they're just like if you would see them in public, you're like, oh yeah, you're in good shape. Like you probably exercise and stuff, but they're just like fit, skinny guy. It's like when offensive linemen retire and they, half of them are just big guys, so they just maintain and still are big. But then half of them, like I remember Alan Faneca for the Steelers retired, and he ran a marathon 2 years later.
I talked
crazy.
I talked to Joe Thomas the year after he retired on Radio Row in like 2019 when him and Andrew Hawkins started their podcast, which was it was a really good podcast.
That was a great podcast, yeah.
And I asked him because he was like noticeably smaller at the time, and I was like, why is that? It's like, are you dedicating yourself to like getting into better shape? He's like, you have no idea how much we have to eat to be able to maintain our size. That like, once you're not working out that much and know that you have to be a certain size, like you just don't have to eat that much. He's like, some guys it goes the opposite way because they've been working out for 25 straight years. That's all they've ever done. The moment they retire, they're like, fuck this. So I'm just going to chill out for a while. Or their body's so damaged that they can't continue to keep up at that pace and they don't lose the appetite and it kind of swings the other way because the nutrition isn't there for them. They kind of balloon up. But for him, he's like, I just never wanted to eat that much.
Well, he's like, Joe Thomas is like ripped out of his mind now.
Yeah.
Like he's like jacked and like in unbelievable shape. Like he went in that direction for sure.
Yeah, and that makes a ton of sense too. Like if you're not trying to bulk and be as like wide and thick as possible, if you just continue to work out and you already have all this built-in muscle and you just reduce your calories by half for the course of a year, you're going to be like super fit.
Yeah, he's just cutting now at this point, right? Like he's just in that phase, but he didn't have to gain the weight in the first place because it was already there.
That's the move. I mean, it's tough. It's a tough process to go through. I do not have the body type for it, unfortunately. I could never be that like wide. I just like grow out this way, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I probably could if I tried, but I don't want to try.
Yeah, it's probably not a good look. Show sheet. I thought this was really interesting. Just from an inside podcasting type of thing. Like, how many shows have you done, do you think? You must be at, what, 3,000?
Like late round podcast shows or shows in my lifetime?
Like late round podcast shows.
I've done, I say I literally do everything for the show.
Well, how about between that and what you do with Denny?
Probably about 1,500.
Okay. And you've done a show sheet for every one of these shows?
Living the Stream, we don't do a show sheet because we have the same format every single week. Like we know we have notes, like because we're talking about streamers on the show. So like we'll come forward, like Denny and I talk about which guys we're going to be talking about, but we intro the show. We talk about BS. We do the streamers for about 10, 15 minutes. Then we answer questions on Twitter. That is the format of that show every single week. But late round podcast, I have sections of it that are like even scripted because I need to get points across to make sure that it's succinct the way that it's succinct. And then whenever I have people on like late round perspectives now, I give them a show sheet. I give them, 10 to 12 questions before we record.
Interesting. I've never given out a show sheet in I think this is show 3957 or something like that. And I mean, I feel like it depends on the show and what you're putting out because like a lot of the people that you have on Late Round Perspectives, are they people who you know well or people you might be meeting for the first time potentially?
I'd say so far there's been some that I've never done a show with, but I've known through like Twitter, like it's not like we've hung out before. Like it's not like that, like where I've like seen them in real life and whatnot and hung out that way. But a lot of it for me, like the show sheet thing, like, because if I say that I've done produce 1,500 shows between my two podcasts, I'd say that I've gone on that, like 1,000 shows, elsewhere, right?
Yeah.
And I'd say the hit rate of a show sheet is probably like, have you gone on another show and there's been a show sheet?
Yeah, but I never open it.
Yeah, okay, that's not surprising to me. So I mean, if you're not a show sheet person, you're not going to open it. But my thing is, I do think that it depends on also the kind of analyst you are. Like,
true, you're serious and I'm not. So that's
well,
that's
it's not even about being serious. It's the idea that I know that I want to come forward with specific data nuggets and data related information. And the easiest way to do that is when there are questions beforehand and I know what to look up. So I'm not doing that while I'm on air or like fumbling for the answer or anything like that. A lot of this stuff, because I do this full time and I'm looking at this stuff all the time, I can just spout things off the top of my head like I did with the prospect stuff earlier, right? To some degree. But like at the same time, it's a lot easier to have those notes right there and prep for them. And no matter how big or small the show is, I'm going to prep. Like that's just how I am as a person. Like I just want to feel prepared because I don't like you, Pat, are probably more comfortable doing whatever, like sitting in front of a camera, doing all that kind of stuff than I am. Right. And so I want the way to combat that is being prepared.
Yeah, so when I worked at Fantasy, we used to do, and like where your show, especially the late round QB, is like it's short and it's full of information that it would have to be segmented in that way where you're delivering as much information as quickly and efficiently as possible, or the whole thing doesn't work whatsoever.
Right.
So that, again, like you need to come prepared with that. For our show, like, the moment things get off the rail or when people tune in to it. So the less you can give guidance to people, generally speaking, it usually works out pretty well from that front for one sort of show that I produce. But when I was at Fantasy, we would be doing like, it was a TV show. So it would be a half-hour TV show with 3 breaks that, you would have to game plan for that. Like, here's the block, here are the segments, we're talking about this for 2 minutes, like most TV shows would have with their rundown, and come with your notes for, here are 2 quarterbacks to stream this week. Here's a cheap DFS guy. Here's an expensive DFS guy you like, whatever it might be. And then you can really hammer down on that. But I've always just found like that type of show, maybe I should do that with people I haven't talked to, because that's maybe one part of the Connect where I can always throw to one of those questions that my guest potentially has prepped for. But I always like the free-flowing nature of something like you and I can kind of go back and forth. And it's not necessarily a prep thing, because I always feel like I am super prepped for everything. That's why I don't need the show sheet. But I do maybe sometimes forget that, especially where I can kind of go anywhere with a situation. Like, it's great for you. I'll ask you, like I told you, the show topic today is NFL. We can talk about anything. And I know that you can talk about anything because, like you said, I know you. We've met, we've hung, we can just banter back and forth too. But with people I haven't met, when I want to get new guests on, maybe that is something I should start to do, is like at least create, like, here's at least a bank of 5 questions I know we'll get to.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that because someone responded to the whole Twitter thing because I just put it out there. Like, I think it's just an interesting conversation to throw out there to the space, right? And give my perspective on it. But like, someone commented and they were like, well, I listen to Joe Rogan and that's I love the conversational way. It's like, okay, but like Joe Rogan shows are not doing like analysis. Like, they're not hopping on to give predictive projections on things that are very specific. It's just like he brings on experts who have or just random people, random comedians and stuff who have some sort of thing that they're very, very good at, and they can just kind of talk at a high level about those things and then dig in when needed. And then even on that show, not that I'm like sitting here listening to Joe Rogan every day, but even on that show, they're like fact checking and like looking things up in the middle of the show. And that's why part of the reason why it's as long as it is. But like, I think that there, is something to be said about, knowing what's coming and being able to prepare for that.
Yeah, well, and I think that comparing anyone to the #1 podcast in the world is kind of a tough scene.
Yeah, right.
Like, here's how the guy who's the best that does it. It's like, well, maybe he has certain talents that other people don't have, that maybe Pat Mayo does not possess, that Joe Rogan can go off and go do. Exactly. And again, like, I saw that that Josh put out, because the Underdog YouTube channel got over 100,000 subs, which is awesome. And he was pointing out like some tricks and tips of how to grow your audience, which I completely agree with, yet I can't actually do on my show, which is a weird spot to be.
Yeah, no, that's a great thread. I'm definitely because I'm only now starting to do more on YouTube like this year, and so that thread was like super helpful. Like I think it's important when content creators go out and they talk about those kinds of things because not just speak for other content creators, but then people can it's kind of like a behind the curtain type deal where people and listeners can kind of see like what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, like just whatever you want to develop with how you tell your stories and the content that you end up going over. Like someone like Josh and even the entire Underdog team, they do such a good job of what they do. Like Chris Harris is another one who kind of does very similar type things with breaking down game film.
Yep.
But he seems to be far less structured, whereas Josh seems to be very structured. And it's just two different approaches of going
Yep.
at the same thing. But when you're in that space, and I think that some people see it as, hey, you're giving away the secrets to the competition. Whereas, like, if you and I are talking about it, I feel like my show and my content is very hard to replicate because it's so me driven a lot of the time and character driven with some of the guests that I have on that, I can tell you exactly what I do. That doesn't mean anyone's going to be able to do it. It's kind of inherently tailored towards me. And I feel like your content is very much the same, that it's inherently tailored towards you. If we tried to swap roles, I mean, you could probably do what I do. I'm not going to lie to you, but I couldn't do what you do, I guess is what I'm saying.
That's not true. No, I agree. I think that people shouldn't feel like they can't share that kind of information or like how the sauce is made, because at the end of the day, the person doing that thing is really what's the differentiator. Like it should be the differentiator. I will help anyone who wants to do a solo podcast and do it in a short form way and try to replicate something like I'm doing. But I also know that I know the amount of time that I'm putting into this stuff. You know what I mean? Like I know the shortcuts I found and like the efficiencies that I found and the databases that I've built to help me come up with the answers that I've come up with. I know that that's not easily replicated, and so I'm gonna lean on that, and I'll still help people out though. Like I think we should be helpful rather than holding that information in.
Yeah, and I find that the fantasy community is a little bit better than that than most others. Like especially like even stepping out of fantasy football and stepping into fantasy golf, where I do a lot of my work as well. Like everyone's very collaborative. Like probably the 10 biggest creators all kind of intermingle and collaborate with each other, and it seems to help us all rather than splitting up the audience or like that's if I'm doing a show that means you can't watch that guy's show. And I feel like there's more of that in the actual gambling community, but less so in the fantasy and even daily fantasy community.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. See, the season-long community, especially because it's just a bunch of like dads, right? Like like it's moms and dads that are getting like we're all like it's not this like cutthroat kind of like arena. Whereas I think when you get a more one-to-one transactional industry like sports betting, it just gets a little bit more difficult. It's a little bit more cutthroat, just naturally.
Yeah, because everyone's competing for subs for things, because most things are tailored towards a package. Speaking of which, if you want to get in on spring football, which is starting very soon, runthesims.com/Mayo can get you 10% off over the UFL projections, which they crush for USFL, they crush for XFL. By combining those leagues together, I feel like we can do really well. And it's the best part of my daily fantasy. And I can't wait for Underdog to come out with the higher and lower props for UFL, because we've been picking those off the last 2 years. I know nothing about this stuff, but Justin knows all. Justin just knowing the depth charts and be able to run projections off of it is like the single biggest advantage in prop betting there is.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge.
Do you do any spring football stuff, or are you just like, nah?
None. Prospect season for me, and then I'm in May. I'll be doing more like I'll get into start work on my draft guide, like the season long guide, and then that'll go out at the beginning of July.
Do you ever get burnt out on just NFL?
No, man, I love it.
I know. It says some people who love it say that. Like after 20 weeks of every day from September 1st through Super Bowl, I'm just like, give me 3 weeks. Like, I just need to not think about this for a while.
No, I agree with that. Like, I get burned out like in season because it's so monotonous. But like out of season stuff, there is nothing that gets me more fired up. And it's taken me years to be okay with like just admitting that I'm like this big. Not that I'm this big of a nerd, but like that this is what fires me up, right? That this is like what gets me really excited. I love digging into stuff and like discovering new trends with like ADP data and like sharing that, right? Like sharing that with an audience that cares. It's amazing. Like I do not get bored of prospecting and figuring things out, or doing the season long guide that I do, any of that, I don't get bored at all. I love it. Like I hope I can do this forever. It's amazing.
Yeah, I can't wait for your findings on the NFL best ball drafts, just so I can like crib those notes and pass them off as my own.
There you go. Perfect.
That's the move. I'll just listen to your show and be like, all right, here's the deal. I did some research, in which my research would be just listening to you, and then present it as fact and see how well that works out for me. Because I'm excited to get into, and it's funny because I used to be really good at fantasy, and then like I stopped caring about season long, so I got like really shitty at season long.
Yeah.
And the moment, because I tried to do everything for a while, like I tried to be like, oh, I need to be really good at gambling and betting props and sides and totals and on daily fantasy and salary cap format and in pick'em and now in best ball draft and now in season long. That once I like kind of, I don't want to say retired from season long, but just stopped giving a shit. I got way better at everything else. That I think I was just too spread out. That the people that still do, like, that's why I'm so excited for you to really dig into best ball this year, is that because you've been digging into season long for so long and got so good at it and figured out all the strategies that your fresh eyes almost like 100% concentrating on this now. Especially during like May and June and those sorts of things when there's nothing really to do in terms of season long. I'm just very excited for what your findings are going to be. I kind of miss that of like, here's something fresh that I can tackle. I'm just going to do a bunch of it, try to see like John Nash it out and try to see some trends myself and then develop my own strategy towards it. And I think that's what's been so exciting about best ball is that it's a fresh concept that people get jazzed up to try to learn what's good, what's bad, what works, what doesn't.
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%. I do this. Like I honestly feel this way with prospecting still, where I started prospecting probably in like 2018, built my first model in like 2020. Like it hasn't been that long. But every year I'm thinking of like, I'll literally have shower thoughts about like new things that I can add to the model and things to test and stuff. Like it happened multiple times this off season. Some of the stuff works, some of it doesn't. But it's really, really fun when, you just do that and then something does work and then you're able to share that thing with people. And everyone gets excited over it. But yeah, I'm excited to dig a little bit more into best ball and, already have season long down. There's definitely more stuff that I'm still adding to that too. And it's nice that there's still like an overlap between the two, like you can still figure something out for one that's still going to benefit the other.
What have you seen in terms of like, I lost a lot of my season long fantasy viewers and listeners over the course of the past few years. Cause I just leaned. So like I said, I kind of gave up on it. Like it stopped after 20 years. It just stopped interesting me after a while. Like even my home league that I've had for, I think this is year 17 of our keeper draft. Like even the stakes of it, like we've never changed the stakes in 17 years.
Yeah,
so
ours hasn't either actually. Yeah.
Like when we were all poor and broke and in college, like, yeah, $50 a year was fine. And now like still playing for $50. It's like, I play like 10 times this on like any, like a gambling slate or daily fantasy slate or whatever it might be. Like why do I care about this anymore outside of the bragging rights, which still does suck you in a little bit, but it can't take away as much time as you would want to do it, if that makes any sense. That giving that up was tough. But have you seen people like, are more people flowing into season long, flowing out of season long, or do you think that people are gravitating now? Because the hope was always from a lot of the companies was people would play season long fantasy football that would trickle up into like DraftKings, FanDuel, whatever it might be, and then that would convert them over to now Sportsbook, which would convert them to iCasino. That's sort of like the levels that it would go up of what those companies would want to do. But I found that just a lot of season long fantasy football players aren't necessarily the hardest core gamblers in the world, or they don't want to play high stakes daily fantasy every single week. That I actually think the Underdog product of best ball is a very natural transition over, because the parts of season long fantasy that like I hate the most is when I draft two guys, like my first 2 round picks get hurt in the first week of the season. My team is fucked for the year. It's like, oh great, now like I can't win this year. Remembering to make waiver moves, keeping up to date on trades, like all that stuff. The older, like it was awesome when I was 20 and in college and we were all around each other and we could like jaw about it all the time. But now like 3 people live in like, one guy lives in South America, one guy lives in China. Like there's no connectivity there outside of this league to talk about the league all the time. But with best ball, you could still smack talk even if you had your own custom league, but it's just the draft. And that's everyone's favorite part anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree totally. It's a natural transition. I mean, even me, like I play way more season long in Dynasty than I sports bet. And then I even get into like the gambling side of things. And I don't pretend to be something that I'm not. Like I'm not never going to tell someone that I'm a betting tout. Like when I tell people what I do for a living, they're always like, "Oh, like who's going to win the who should I bet to win the Super Bowl this year?" I'm like, "That's not what I do. Like that's just not what I do. It's not what I'm probably ever going to do. And I'm not going to do it for like a money grab or something, because it's just not what I'm like overly interested in. I'm more interested in these players and the development and projecting the development and building these teams and the game theory behind it and all that. And I do think that there's like if you were to take season long and then go to sports betting, that's a much greater leap than season long to best ball. Season long to best ball is not a big leap whatsoever. It's literally pretty much the same kind of format. It's the same thing. It's just a different, just a slightly different iteration to it, where you can draft a lot more at the end of the day, and you can also try to build a portfolio and win some money. So I do think it really comes down to, there's a lot of season long players who want to be good, but maybe don't spend a ton of money, and maybe they don't want to spend a ton of money. Maybe they won't be interested in best ball draft as a result of that. Maybe. But I think that there's enough low stakes stuff out there that the majority of people who are listening to my podcast or, listening to a season long show would convert and want to play on Underdog, because it's a lot of time. There is a lot of overlap there.
Yeah, like even to think about it, like if you're playing like weekly daily fantasy and there's $1 million to first place, but it's like 25 or $50 an entry, and that you probably need at least 50, 100 every single week to put that in. Like that just prices out so many people. Well, whereas like you can draft, like you can go onto Underdog right now and go into the NFL draft section. Like I'm just pulling it up right now. There is, there's a bunch of contests out there right now. Like the big board is out. So you can do a $10 entry. You can draft, what is it, up to 150 teams. There's $2 million in prizes, but you can start those now in March and draft all the way through. If you want to build up a portfolio in the $10, hell, you want to do one per week between now, you could build yourself up 35 teams, and that'll cost you $350, which might be more than you normally spend on like a season long league, but you've now been doing it for the last 6 months, and presumably you're going to get better as it goes along. Or maybe you end up with a really good team in March because all of the information hadn't trickled out yet, and you end up getting super lucky in that sense. Or just wait for the big $3 to come out on best ball, and you can take that $300 and draft 100 teams if that's what you want to do. So I think that Underdog prices people in that sense that want to come from fantasy to season long. And then you also have the pick'em carrot that's out there, which is my favorite single part of this, because I think that kind of goes hand in hand with season-long fantasy too, because all season-long fantasy really is, all making projections is. Like, how do I think this player is going to do on this given day? As a collection, you can draft them, but as a pick'em, you can be like, well, I think Mike Evans is going to smash Marshawn Lattimore today, and I think he's going to go for 140 yards. So I'm just going to take the more than 70.5 with him because I have conviction on that. So I think those three things are all in the same realm, where the other stuff is just more like sports betting.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, like I'll even admit, like I barely play DFS anymore, and like I used to play a decent bit, but it's just a different kind of economy, and it's a different type of game where the research does obviously have some overlap. Like, yeah, I like this guy, but then it's all like the way that I view a player in season long can be totally different than the way that I view him in DFS. And there's a lot of research and work that goes on in doing that. Whereas the way I view a player in season long and the way that I view him in best ball, there's a lot more overlap there. Like it's like, if I don't like Chase Brown in season long, I'm probably not going to love him that much on Underdog either. Right. Whereas if he's $4,500 on FanDuel or whatever, then yeah, we're going to use Chase Brown, like it's a different economy. It's a different approach to the game. And I just don't have the ability to research all of that stuff for DFS, for sports betting, what have you, as I would, for best ball in season long.
Yeah, for sure. And like in so much of that comes down, like Zach Moss was a really good example last year when like on DraftKings for like 2 weeks in a row after Jonathan Taylor went down again, that he would be like $4,900 or something like that. And then the discussion wasn't that was he a good play or bad play based on what he was going to do. Of course he was going to do well, which is funny because he actually didn't do well. But it was like, well, he's going to be owned by half the field. Do you even play him? Like, it's a totally different discussion, and it has those fun elements of game theory like you were talking about, but they're completely different. They don't translate totally 1v1 like season long to best ball. Do I actually think Pick'em does as well?
Yeah, totally agree.
Challenge briefly.
Sure.
Did you see the cast?
Yeah, I'm pumped. Do we know the theme? Because I was thinking, was thinking about this earlier today. Do you think that they're going to go with like a generations theme with like Mark being there and Rachel being there and stuff?
So based on what I've seen, so if you don't want to know who's on the challenge season 40, I mean, if you're watching this for the challenge, then I'm sure that you want to, and you probably know this already. But it looks like it's separated into 4 eras of players. So there's probably going to be 4 teams because it seems like they've taken players from seasons 0 to 10. And
Yes.
like there's 10 of those people. Then 10 to 19, there's 10 of those people. 20 to 30, there's 10 of those people. And then 30 through 40 now, there's 10 of those people. So it only logically makes sense that there'd be 4 teams of 10, 5 men, 5 women from each of the eras.
That's so it is sort of like this generations type thing.
Which makes for really interesting teams because like era 2, the females on era 2 are amazing, but the men are basically Johnny Bananas and a bunch of scrubs.
Yeah, I was gonna say because CT would be the first era, right? And Bananas would be the second era.
Yeah, so like era 1 has like the strongest men, but their females are terrible. It's like the men are Brad, CT, Darrell,
Mark.
Derek, and Mark Long. Like that's a fivesome right there.
That's
But
a good fivesome. Yeah.
they have Jody, who's awesome, and Rachel, who's awesome. But they also have Tina, Katie, and Anissa, who are terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. I do like this idea though that's probably how they're splitting it up.
Do you think this is the last like go for all of these people, basically?
No.
I think it is.
I like that. Do you? Like
Yeah.
it's good to see that like Leroy's back and I know he's doing All-Star or he did All-Stars too. But like I don't know, man. I feel like some sure, but like I watched my wife and I watched the Bananas documentary thing last night, and the way he spoke made it sound like he's just going to keep going as long as he can possibly go.
See, I can see that, but I would guess that if All Stars continues to be a thing, he gravitates towards that because that's not 3 months of filming.
Like
it's
2
3
weeks or
weeks
whatever.
of filming. And
Yeah.
Bananas has done a lot of good PR for himself over the past 6 months or so. Like House of Villains was the highest rated show on E since the heyday of the Kardashians, and he was the star of that show.
Yeah. No, I get it. But I still think though that they're like, it's become like the challenge has become a sport, right? In a way.
Which sucks.
And I think that the people who are involved are literally addicted to this thing, similarly to how when athletes retire, they don't want to retire because they're so into that thing. But you can do the challenge into your 40s if you stay in shape, as opposed to getting knocked around in football against other professionals doing it. You know what I mean? Like it's just a different kind of competition. So like Mark, how old's Mark? 51?
Oh, I think he's older than that. I think Mark Long's like 55 now.
Yeah, like
I mean,
mean,
Mark Long invented HGH.
Yeah, I mean, like he's a monster for his age, but like the fact that he can still come on and do it, and a lot of these people are literally like they work out for a living. You know, like they get paid to go on to do these appearances and then go on these shows and stuff. Like I could see them just doing it for a really long time.
Mark Long is 52, by the way. Looking at it
Okay,
now.
so I look at me. I had the prices right. I was perfect with the 51.
You nailed that. You won both showdowns. So
Yeah.
you're gonna have to pay a lot of taxes on those boats.
That's right. That's right.
Era 3 is interesting because this feels like such a dead era of the show. It's Amanda Avery, who I'm just so pumped to see Avery. You know, Hooters pinup girl, Avery. That's what she's doing these days. John A, Naya, and Tori.
It's a good group of girls.
It is, but it's with Leroy, Tony, Corey, Devin, and someone else. It would have been Nelson. Did you see Nelson got his leg amputated?
I did. Yeah, it's sad, man. It's sad. But I don't know. That era sounds pretty good. Like it's solid. Like there's a lot of people who just have not been able to like really take it over the edge, like a Leroy and like a Tony, and we haven't seen Tony in a while either.
He's on All Stars 4 too.
Yeah,
shredded. I don't think he drinks anymore.
Oh man, Tony not drinking those is gonna make very good television.
Well, this is the whole point of this is why the challenge has suffered. It became competitive CrossFit, and I don't want to watch that. I want to see Tony come on the show day one, like I think it was Rivals 3, when he just shows up, he gets annihilated within like 10 minutes of being in the house. And he's talking about like, yeah, me and my long-term girlfriend, like we're good now. Like no less than a scene later, he's taking his mic off in the bathroom with like Christina, who just came from Are You the One? Like, that's what I want to see on the challenge. I don't really care how competitive they are, like running a marathon.
You still saw that to some degree last season. Like there was
still
still like
a little bit. I like that they leaned back into it a little bit more, but like that was gone for like 6 seasons in a row.
No, I mean, it's definitely become more of a, I mean, I was watching the bananas thing, and so my wife didn't watch the challenge with me until probably 2018 or around Dirty 30 probably ish was when she started. And so, but she knew I had watched it, you know, throughout my whole life or whatever. And we were watching the bananas documentary, and it showed his first elimination with the watermelons. Remember the
him and Tyler on Duel 1.
Yeah, right, against Tyler. And she's like, that was the elimination. Like, he literally just had to say, pick up this many watermelon. You can't do it. And then he did it. And then he's just gone. Like the show is completely different. Like, do you remember Battle of the Sexes and stuff? And like the kinds of things that they did back then where like I always remember the ice one that they did where they had to melt the giant block of ice. And there's that video of what was his name? Danny, from Road Rules. And he's sitting there just like smashing his butt into the ice and go like, that's all they did was just try to melt a piece of ice. Like that's what they did.
They brought back that mission on All Stars.
Wait,
it was awesome.
Wait, was it last season? Was it?
I think it was All Stars 1 because Alton pissed.
I'm kind of remembering this now too. Yeah, they did do that. And then didn't they do one where there was the one where they had their hand on the ice. That is also another, I don't know if that was All Stars or not. I just remember there was one where they had to like keep their hand on the ice as long as possible. And they're on there for like 7 hours and their whole arms are just numb.
Like another one that like, I think that when you start mixing like goofy with things that are hard at the same time. So here's an example of both of them. Like Leroy like knocked himself out once. I think it was on Vendettas when they had to jump from car to car and everyone basically got injured doing it. Because it was the most unsafe thing of all time. But it was like, you're 40 feet above the water and you need to jump from this dangling car to this dangling car. And I think Zach went through a windshield. Leroy fell and like knocked himself out in the water. Like that's not fun or entertaining. Like that just looks miserable. But there was another one. I think it was either Rivals 1 or Rivals 2 or X's or whatever it might be that you and your partner had to get into like a bunch of honey and rub it all over yourselves and try to make it across a balance beam and then drop the honey into something else. Like, that's far more low stakes in terms of athleticism, but it's a much better watch.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. I mean, if you can find like I always enjoy more of like the cardio focused ones with like just like mini finals and stuff. Like those kinds of challenges are interesting because you can throw in the insanity in between that. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't have to. But then last season was just not enough of the physical because last season wasn't fun or physical with a lot of the challenges that they had.
Yeah, so one thing that they should never do on the challenge is have men and women compete against each other. It just doesn't work because they have to equalize everything. So everything ends up becoming a puzzle, which is just not entertaining. Like watching two people on TV do Sudoku, not the most interesting thing in the world.
Right.
And then when they try to do it the other way, where they do try to have a physical elimination between a man and a woman, they actually have to rig it up with an equalizer, put like a counterbalance weight, but you don't actually know who's going in. So that like it becomes an inherent disadvantage to one of them massively. And then it's just not fair at that point for whatever way like the scales are tipped. Either there's not enough weight, too much weight, and just it's not interesting.
They need to do away with single champions. Like they need a male and female champion.
Agree.
Every season.
Or
team whatever, like teams of 4, teams of 3, whatever it is. Like to have, I didn't like it is funny to me whenever they like count their rings and stuff, and they have like like back in the like in like the duels and stuff like that, like some of the older seasons where they had like 6 winners on one team. That's like, is that really the same as winning a solo as like a male solo competitor?
And see, I agree, but I think they should just bring back more team seasons. Like having more.
No, I agree with that.
Is a good thing.
Yes. No, I think size wise, it shouldn't be more than 4 for a team. Like 3 or 4 is good. I don't want 7. I don't want 7 champions. They've had some like when Rogan won and stuff. Like what season? I don't. That was the season
too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Like that's fine. Like that kind of stuff is fine. Or like Battle of the Seasons type stuff is fine when it's 4 like teams of 4 or something like that. I just get irritated when it's like legit like like it's fine if it starts out as like 8, but then you figure out a way to people turning on each other and having to vote them off and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I can get behind that. Like, I don't, I think that having a solo season, like individual season, it was so cool when they finally did it for the duel. And they brought it
Yeah.
back with the duel 2. And then we had free agents. But like the teams of 2, I really liked. The solo stuff, I think needs to be like every 5th season or something like that, because
Yeah, I agree.
And just even the interpersonal dynamics of being on a team and being like, well, this guy sucks on our team. Like, we need to figure out a way to get rid of this person on our team. Is just inherently more interesting.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
So,
I agree with you.
So I'm bummed about that. So I'm just really hoping, like, now that you have, and a lot, frankly, old school reality TV stars, like they were doing it for when TJ would show up. He's like, yeah, you get like $500 to throw into your team bank account and this sweet flip phone. And people are like, whoa, a flip phone.
Yeah, I'll light myself on fire for this. Yeah. Like, they definitely, it's just a different beast, but I don't think it's bad, right? It's just a different. I like, though, that we can at least have the nostalgia of what it used to be and understand and have the context of where it's at now. And then sometimes you get like some throwback type players who are like I think like a Kyland is kind of a throwback type player where he just competes. Like he's like a Landon type where he's just like, he's not politicking very well. He just kind of goes out there and he just does his thing. And then you respect that because you have that comparison to make. And then you see the people who are on the opposite side of the spectrum. Then you can kind of just like make those comparisons. I like that aspect of it. It's kind of like a sport, like football, right? Like we can compare Patrick Mahomes to Dan Marino, understanding that they're in different eras, right? And then every once in a while you get a guy like Tom Brady who plays for 20 years and, you know, they span multiple eras like a Bananas or a CT.
Do you think it's funny that Fessy is a alternate for the season?
Is he officially an alternate? I don't remember.
He's officially an alternate. So I don't know if he gets on or not, but it's just funny that he's an alternate.
I saw that Jordan was doing a race of some sort and then had to go late to the
is he actually? I thought he was just so Era 3 doesn't have its full complement of men yet. So I assume Jordan ends up becoming the 5th man if that's true.
Which would be, again, I think that era is kind of stacked.
If they get Jordan, then yeah, it is kind of stacked. But like Amanda sucks, Avery probably sucks. Devin sucks. He just happened to win a season that was basically rigged for him.
Devin's okay. He's okay.
Sure, he's okay. Like John A is okay. She's better than she was. Naya's not very good. Tony's never been good.
Yeah, but if you get Leroy's in that one, right?
Yeah, I mean it's just a bunch of people who've never won, except for weirdly John A and Devin.
Right, and then but Jordan would take that over the edge, I think.
Yeah, Jordan. Yeah, and then he would be on the same team as Tori, which would be fun. Era 4 is weird too, because that could, like, on paper, could be a really good team.
Who's Era 4? It'd be Jay, Michelle.
No, Jay didn't make it. Jay got cut.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, Jay ended up becoming an alternate because they replaced him with Pauly.
Oh, that's even better though.
Yeah, so it's Kyland, Horacio, Pauly, Theo, and Josh. Josh sucks, but the other 4 are good.
No, that's a really good. Yeah, that's a good group.
And then the women are Jenny West, who we haven't seen since she won.
Oh my gosh, she's a beast.
So it's Jenny, Casey, Nerese, Olivia, and Michelle.
That's a pretty good squad too.
Sounds like a really good team, and they
sounds
do.
Like the old heads are gonna get crushed.
Yeah, they don't have any 52-year-olds on that team.
Yeah, no,
like
that's actually a good
Josh
squad.
sucks. Olivia sucks. Michelle isn't physically as gifted as some people, but she's like smarter than everyone, so that's helpful.
Yeah, but you know that you know, if this is the way that they're really setting things up, you know that there's gonna be a lot of scheming to get the young bucks out.
Yeah, I mean that's how it works. I mean, there's a few people that are missing, but overall, I think it's a pretty good cast. Listen to this: the Era 2 women: Cara, Emily Schramm, Kellyanne, Laurel, and Aviv.
That's insane. That's insane.
But the men are Bananas with Ryan Kehoe, Nehemiah, Derek Chavez, and Brandon Nelson.
That's horrible.
Yeah, that's bad. Unless Brandon's on All-Stars 4, so is Derek. And Nehemiah's been good on All-Stars. But maybe Brandon Nelson's like actually really good and just has been out of the game for so long we haven't noticed. Like Derek Chavez is bad. Ryan Kehoe is bad.
Yeah, that's bad. That's a bad squad.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm excited to talk challenge with you in the upcoming months here.
Me too, man. Me too. Should
Well,
be
it's been a
fun.
lot of fun. Code Mayo at underdogfantasy.com. Get yourself a match deposit up to $100. I know that JJ is going to be doing some best ball drafts. I'm going to be streaming some NFL best ball drafts. You want to get into PGA? We'll be doing drafts on that as well, along with picking. I'm launching a new show on Mayo Media Network to get people ready for MLB season, because the best ball drafts, although MLB season is technically started, you can still do the best ball drafts for the season, and that will start going daily for pick'em and betting as well. So just use code Mayo and get over to Underdog Fantasy right now. All right, smash the like while you're here, sub to the channel, and download the audio podcast under Pat Mayo Experience. I'm Pat Mayo. See you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!